Hello, Church on the Rock. My name is Steve Gumaer. I have 3 daughters, aged 24, 22, and 18. I am married to a Norwegian goddess whose name is Odni. We've been married for 30 years this year. And it's my wife and I who started Partners Relief and Development, one of your partner organizations. And we continue to lead that organization today. I'm grateful that I can be with you today. Even though it's a video, it's real, we are connecting. I get to contribute and be a part of this wonderful conference you do each year. And I want to just say with my whole heart, thanks. Thanks that I can be here. In 1994, my wife and I hiked into a refugee camp. And we met a widow whose name was Rose. And over the course of a few visits, we got to know her story. She had suffered terribly. She went from being a wealthy, upper-class Myanmar citizen. She was a teacher. Her husband was a veterinarian. She went from that state to being a refugee who had been imprisoned unjustly, who in the process had lost her husband. He died. And now was stuck in a refugee camp without a passport, raising 2 toddlers. That was her situation when we met her. And my wife and I were struck by this woman's tenacity, her resilience, her sense of humor. And so we kept going back to visit her. At the time, we were working with Youth with a Mission, running a training base in Chiang Mai, Thailand. And this was really just a side adventure for us to explore what a refugee camp was all about. And there we met Rose. Well, on about our 4th visit, she had about a 4-year-old little girl sleeping on the floor of her bamboo hut. While we sipped on tea that she made for us after we got there, we asked who this child was. And she told us that pro-democracy soldiers who were sent to this child's village after it was attacked in order to find survivors and find out what happened. When they got there, they found a destroyed village and dead people, and they found 1 survivor. Rose said that it's very likely that 1 survivor, this beautiful little girl, was very likely carried by her loved ones as they ran from the village, as the village was under attack. They very likely hid that little girl in the hiding place where she was found by these pro-democracy soldiers, and then gathered and then carried for the 2 to 3 day walk back to the border of where Thailand and Myanmar connect, across the Shoglo, across the Moy River and down the Shoglo stream to where this camp was, Shoglo Refugee Camp, where Rose lived. They brought this child to Rose and asked her to be the foster mother, the caregiver for this unaccompanied child. They didn't know if her parents were dead or alive. All they knew was she was the only known survivor from that particular attack in 1994. Rose looked up at us after telling us that story and said, "Steve, can you help me be a lifeline for this child and kids like her?" And I mentioned that I worked with Youth with a Mission. I often call it Youth Without Any Money because back then we lived on and ran our ministry on about $500 a month. And so money was tight, and when we were asked to help this potentially orphaned child, we asked, well, how much is it going to cost? Because we don't have much money. We calculated the cost with Rose for everything this little girl would need for a whole year. Sandals and a blanket, a towel, an extra tunic that tribe wears, pencils, pens, school supplies, a coin for the offering plate. I didn't mention, but Rose was a wonderful Christian woman. And all of the things that this child would need for a whole year, because food would be provided by the international community in that camp of 10,000 people at the time. The total cost was $30 for a year. So we committed those $30 and went back to Chiang Mai where we lived. It was about a 12-hour journey on foot, bus, open truck, and finally motorcycle back to our house. And and we got home, and it was like, Adni, what did we just do? What did we just sign up for here? I mean, you don't make a commitment to a child and then walk away from it. So we kept going back, and every time we went back, Rose had 3, 5, 7, 12 more children. And these are children that were brought, again, by the pro-democracy soldiers. And each time we got there, Rose asked, well, can I just take 2 more? Can I just take 5 more? And the question wasn't, can I? The question was, will you support me to do this? At the time, there was no place for children like that in these camps. There was no unaccompanied minor support. And so every time we said yes. And that's another sermon. The gospel is always yes. But each time when we made that commitment, we went back home and wrote a letter to our friends and family, and we explained what we experienced, explained the need, and we were overwhelmed by the generosity of people we knew. People saying, hey, if that's the story, we're with you. We're going to support that. That child matters to us, just like that child matters to you. And so we kept committing. Within a year, I think we had 37 kids in Rose's home. And then within the course of 3 years, if I remember correctly, we had just over 1,000 children in 12 homes in 8 refugee camps. That's how it started. But really how it started was a yes to $30. That's really how it started. Today, if you support our work or you follow us on social media, you'll know that we helped over 500,000 people in countries like Yemen and Syria and Iraq and Bangladesh and Myanmar and Thailand, places where the structure of society is aimed against the thriving of children, where political complexity and violence prevents children from having the basic things they need. That is the criterion that we look for in order to engage and find a way to help. These are the things that you support. It all started with $30. It started where we were. Now, I'd like to ask you a question. Have you ever walked down the street and seen a homeless person and wondered if you shouldn't just stop and curiously hear their story and maybe find a way to get involved with their story? Have you at your work ever seen a single mother struggling to deal with bagging her groceries while 4 children run around and terrorize the staff of that store, and seen that woman and thought, I wonder if I could do something to engage with her or people who struggle like her, or even get to know what it's like to be a single mother? Have you ever been around a young adult who's got potential and you see that, and who's wonderful and beautiful and great, but kind of trapped in their own dysfunction, trapped in a cycle of that, you know, probably leads to being a criminal? You see that person, that young adult, and you think, wow, I wonder if I could get involved and do something for that kid. When I was thinking about this talk, I thought one time in particular stood out. I was in Las Vegas, Nevada, working with or volunteering for an outreach that helps street people. And I was there with my young daughter. This is about 15 years ago, with my daughter Naomi, beautiful little kid. And I felt a little insecure being surrounded by, you know, street people and people that scared me. And but I felt also committed because I thought, these are people that need my help. And I met one family who were living in their car. And they told me their story. I asked for their story because their daughter volunteered before the food was handed out to the people that showed up. Their daughter volunteered and sang a song, and this girl sang like an angel, just beautiful. I remember it to this day, just incredible voice. 13 or 14-year-old young girl. And the father told me their story, that they fell short on rent, he lost his job, they didn't manage to get you know, the support that was available to them by the state, and through a series of events ended up on the street, living in their car. I don't remember more facts than that, but I remember feeling devastated by meeting a guy, a husband and a father whose whole family is living in their car. And I remember feeling ambivalent and not knowing what to do. And in the end, I didn't do anything. I prayed for them and I said goodbye and I left. When I think back to my interaction with that family and how I walked away that afternoon, I think I missed an opportunity. I had good reasons. What am I going to do? What do I do with my daughter? How do I get involved with this family? Do I spend money and buy them food or rent or gas? What will people say if I get involved with this family living in their car? I mean, for 1,000 different reasons, and even thinking about the danger of that possibility. There's always reasons not to do that thing that you feel compelled to do, but it's not doing it is missing out. And I could have just curiously asked more questions and learned. And in the asking, God being who He is, I could have landed on some creative action that could have resulted in the transformation of that family and potentially transformation of thousands of families just like them. That failure is overlaid against what happened with partners. We found a way to engage. We got involved, and getting involved has meant a world of difference, potentially life-saving difference, for millions of people now since 1994, for 26 years. And if I hadn't, or if my wife and I hadn't made that step, if we hadn't put it out there and taken the risk to engage and committed to learning through both the challenges of starting and momentum and the challenges of failure, which are sure to happen, then all of these children, all of these hundreds of thousands of children and families in war zones wouldn't have been touched, wouldn't have been reminded that they're loved and not forgotten by us and by God. And what's at stake by listening to the world? John says, don't listen to the world, Paul, the apostle, says, don't be conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Be transformed in resisting what the world wants for you. And when we do that, things happen. I mean, people are impacted. It requires a level of awareness to start where you are. You have to see this dirty, rotten system for what it is. The system wants us to be consumers, and it wants us to blend in, and it doesn't want us to make waves. And the system is dominated by ego and the energy of ego. It's all against what we call the kingdom of God. The kingdom of God is a proactive, irresistible force. It doesn't just say it loves its neighbor, it loves its neighbor. And when the neighbor is loved, God being again a part of that equation, it is unstoppable. Things happen, stuff grows, new opportunities present themselves as one is taken. In 2016, I met a grandmother in northern Iraq, a Yazidi woman. She told me how her village was attacked by ISIS, Sinjar Mountain. She lived on Sinjar Mountain in northern Iraq, and her village was attacked. Her friends and fellow villagers were rounded up and caged and abused, shot on sight, taken as sex slaves, whatever. 12 of her own family were captured. And 3 of them were her granddaughters who eventually were sold multiple times as sex slaves. And she herself, this woman, 61-year-old Yazidi grandmother, was caged, imprisoned, starved, beaten, and abused in inconceivable ways, and was fortunate enough to escape. I don't remember how she escaped. But as she told me her story and wept, we wept together. the first thing I had to offer that woman was my empathy, and that's what we all have to offer. It costs no money, it costs nothing. But to empathize and be a part of their story, to let their story in and be affected by it, to be willing to be potentially involved in even the answer to some of the struggles that they go through. There's the key. So I heard her story, and after hearing that, we went to see the Kurdish administration in northern Iraq, and when they understood what we wanted to do, they helped us fast-track the registration of our organization in Iraq. And they knew that we not only wanted to help in Iraq, but we wanted to help also in Syria. This experience with that grandmother was one of many that I think of when I think of the value of continuing to push forward, to not allow the naysayers to stop me. Those people who say you can't afford it, you're not talented enough, you don't have the proper education, you're risking not only your own health and livelihood, you're risking that of your daughters. You will hear every conceivable grievance as soon as you want to do something that is out of step with the world. And remember, the world is against what the kingdom of God wants. We're to be transformed out of the mold of the world. We're not supposed to conform. To start where you are, a great place to start is where Jesus started. The very first time he opened his mouth in public, Luke chapter 4 records that he quoted Isaiah 58 and Isaiah 61. And those passages were heavy words for the Hebrew tribe coming out of exile. They said that your love, you will be known by setting the oppressed people free, not holding them into slavery. You'll be known by the lame being healed, by the sick being cared for. You'll be known by the hungry being fed. You will be known by justice. Justice is the earmark of Jesus, and as he announced his mission to heal the sick, to make the lame walk, the blind receive their sight, and the oppressed be set free, he was indicating the mission of us all. And as we engage in that mission, when we give what we have to offer, even in the smallest level, wherever our capacity is, when we start where we are and we engage in that event, believe that God is standing right behind you. Believe that more is to come, that you will experience creative insight about how to go about your work, the work of the gospel. That's my story. In a nutshell, that's my story. In closing, I want to thank you again for being a part of our work. Together, we've impacted, like I said, over 500,000 people this year. And we've done that work where violence and political complexity prevents children and families from having the things they need to survive in brutal, war-torn places like Yemen, in places that are unstable with a high number of internally displaced people like northern Iraq, a place that is currently in a state of war and conflict like Syria. Again, in Bangladesh, same story. Myanmar, same story. Where goodness is in short supply, we've shown up together. You, our team, and of course God, and wonderful things are happening. So Church on the Rock, thank you and God bless you.